Thank you very much. Fabulous. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Myself and my co-founder, Ali Anderson, at the far side of the stage, we're co-founders of Renew the World, which we will tell you a bit more about as we go through this discussion. And we're joined, very delighted to be joined by Cara Wiley from Dunfermline. And welcome, Cara. And we're really pleased to be asked by our friends Daydream Believers and Lego to take part in this discussion on rethink, reimagine and redesign. We love the whole hashtag of get on with it. It really fits the ethos of Renew the World and what we are doing. And yeah, thank you again for joining us. So we will we'll just take you through a little bit of background, really, if that's a helpful way to start. Who are we? Well, a not-profit organisation and not-for-profit organisation born of the realisation that we'll just take you through the world, a little bit of background, really, if that's a helpful way to start. Who are we? Well, a not-profit organisation and not-for-profit organisation. We've got to get on with it, which again fits, we think, really well with the ethos of everything that's happening here today. And you know, we're experienced consultants, people specialists, political, technology, environmental interests, a whole range of people actually behind the scenes who are not with us today as well. And we believe very strongly that and I think it's been underlined by some of the stuff we've seen at COP over the last 48 hours, as the intergovernmental relations and discussions get really into the teeth of it, that actually we all really need to change behaviours. We've got to grasp the seriousness of the circumstances that the world is in. And we believe that happens better when we engage, embrace, inspire, and involve everybody around the world. And I think that call has been really, really clear and really, really loud during COP26. So what we're going to try to do over the next period of time is curate these places at Renew the World, where we spotlight people who are getting involved in delivering that real action. By doing so, we believe that we will encourage greater investment, use of the right technologies, and helping to create and inspire the right environments for change. And indeed, I'm delighted to be standing behind this lectern, which is its first ever run out. This is an example. This lectern is a perfect example of what we're talking about. It's been made by our friends at Reblade, so reblade.co.uk for anybody watching who wishes to have a look at them. And this is made from part of an old wind turbine blade, because wind turbine blades have a lifespan. And when this one was decommissioned, it had covered between 27 and 28 million air miles. It's part of a 50-meter blade. And another little stat that we think is really interesting is it's probably been hit by lightning about 60 times during its lifetime. But this is a perfect example of the kind of thing that we're talking about. Instead of decommissioning these and putting them in landfill or doing other things, not so environmentally friendly, then let's reuse. And this is a wonderful example of rethinking, reimagining, and redesigning. And it's a fantastic thing. And we actually think it looks really beautiful as well. So yeah, how did we get here? Well, Ali, I'm going to bring you in at this point. When we started talking about what we were going to do for COP26, we felt that it was really important we tried to engage voices from every generation, and particularly those young voices like Cara's, who are perhaps less commonly heard in these kind of conversations. Do you want to tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so we first started talking about COP, and it had been renamed the People's COP. We thought, well, yeah, great, let's make sure that Scottish people are involved, and particularly let's focus in on young people, maybe young people who haven't kind of been in the climate sphere yet, but are sitting in classrooms or at home and worried about the climate and wanting to get engaged and get a chance to say to leaders and people involved in that sphere, come on, let's get a move on, get on with it, batch your hashtag again. So that's kind of where we we started out thinking, well, what can we do? Can we bring some new young voices to COP and give them a chance to say this? So we were lucky enough to get these 2 slots at the New York Times. And then we thought, wow, well, that's really thrown them in the deep end, but what a great environment to have a kind of free thinking and imaginative discussion on solutions and action plans. And that's very much what we got. It was great. We had an amazing day last Friday when we launched. And I think all the young people really enjoyed it. It was quite an amazing place, wasn't it, Cara? Ellie Goulding was wandering around, so that was quite exciting. Well, I wasn't quite sure who that was, being a bit of an old fogey. John Kerry was there as well later on. So the young people that were still with us at the end of the day got a chance to listen to him. And it really lived up to our expectations. I think we thought, oh, this is going to be brilliant. And then it was, which is really nice because sometimes it doesn't work out like that. But yeah, it was a fantastic space in the forum. And I suppose I should let Cara have a wee say about what you thought about it.
Yeah, well, it was like the day, like I was there for the full day, so I saw like a couple of other talks that day. I saw their first talks. I was on the second panel, sort of, with like more female, which is about female encouragement.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of powerful women on stage. It was a real energy, but we'll get to that bit in a minute as well. And you can see Cara speaking and the lineup with all the other female guest speakers we had. So we kind of had this plan about a year ago when COP was postponed. That's when we first started talking about it. And then, of course, was COP going to happen at all? Was it going to go ahead? How were we going to do it? Was it going to be virtual or in person? So it was really the last sort of 10 weeks that we really, all our sort of planning kind of kicked in majorly. And lots of paddling under the water, like I'm sure everybody involved in this project have been doing like mad on the run up as well. So yes, it's been really great.
Many plates were spinning.
Yes.
But luckily none of them fell over and crashed. So, and we're here today to tell the story. And as Ali said, we were really keen to try to launch by living some of what we talk about in terms of engaging, bringing more voices to the table. Let's hear, if we believe in diversity, let's hear diverse opinions. Diversity should really be diversity of thought. And very often the world treats diversity as a bit of a tick box exercise. We actually believe in it. And so we thought, well, let's just do our small bit to help. And in the run up to COP, there was a lot of press about the amount of anxiety people are feeling around climate change. And that continues to this day, but we know that action is the best antidote to anxiety. Which you'll hear a little bit more of in a wee second. And as Ali said, we were really delighted to be able to get the opportunity to launch at the New York Times Hub. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you, we'll show you a couple of videos throughout our discussion today. But here's our little launch one, which maybe puts a little bit more of what we're talking about into context.
Our world faces many real challenges. Without doubt, the biggest collective challenge facing all of humanity is how we tackle what's happening to our climate.
A big part of the problem has been the way this has been discussed for decades, based upon a sensationalist, fear-driven narrative that stokes division. You see, when any human is put in a place of fear or catastrophe, we all respond with a variation of one of three ways: fight, flight, or freeze. We're hardwired that way. The inevitable consequences of these understandable responses all sow discord, which mean collective action is paradoxically even harder to achieve.
We understand that it has been a human innovation which has unwittingly put us in the climate situation we are in.
We also know that it is human innovation and collective action that is our only ticket to a sustainable future. Most of the technology required to keep temperature rises to 1.5 degrees has already been invented. These examples of climate action need to be shared and better understood.
We don't have time, nor do we believe we have to wait to be told what to do. We have ultimate faith in humanity's ability to innovate and find solutions.
It's what humanity does best, after all. So we believe that we can create a place where those ideas for real climate action can be shared, understood, adopted and adapted by local communities, organisations and businesses around the world. After all, the best antidote to anxiety is action. And we only have one world. We can't grow another one.
So we want to focus on actions, the innovations that are happening and the opportunities for real, radical change they can create.
By doing so, we want to enable communities and people in every part of our planet to get involved. Join us and bring that focus to innovation, the opportunities we can create together.
And let's all renew the world.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we've got a lot more to say about that, but we do have some examples of organisations who we've been working with, like Reblade, as I say, who made this beautiful lectern on our website at renewtheworld.org, and Bamboo Brush, who you saw there, who make bamboo toothbrushes. And yeah, so there's many others which are available on our website, and that's going to grow. But fundamentally, the next big project is to create more than a website and to create a system where we can actually allow people to make those connections much more meaningfully. But that's the next phase of Renew the World. But what we did last Friday in launching was we thought we would have two particular discussions. Our first one was a discussion on Scottish and Arctic youth, which we'll come back to in a moment. And the second one, which Cara was involved in, and there she is, sitting proudly on screen and on the stage at the time, alongside all those really powerful, wonderful people that we mentioned earlier, was about how we unlock a just transition, and as you can see, prioritising female voices within that, because it's really important, as I said earlier, that we have proper diversity of thought as we do this. Now, I think Ali and I felt it would be a bit unfair to ask Cara to say too much about the first Arctic session, so we'll kind of talk through a little bit of that, because in the run-up, Cara was focused much more on this second session. So I'm not going to ask her to say too much about the first one, but Scottish and Arctic youth. As I said, we felt this was really important, and our first discussion was focused on collaboration. How can young people here in Scotland and everywhere else in the world, actually, but we are focusing it on the young people here, connect with Arctic young people and say, well, what areas can we collaborate on, work together? How do we understand each other better? And we had a really, really good discussion, didn't we, Ali?
Yeah, and it was really good because obviously there's been quite a lot of work going on in Scotland anyway, with the Scottish Arctic unit, and that whole idea of Scotland looking north as well as looking down the way, and having a lot in common with our Nordic and our Arctic neighbours. So when we were thinking about themes for the panel discussion, we decided that we'd focus in on that aspect for the first one, and then kind of enabling young women into leadership roles for the just transition in the second one. So we sort of kicked off thinking, well, we'll get some young people together and we'll do some Zoom workshops and find out what they know about the Arctic and what they know that's been happening in terms of Scottish connections, and then just build it up from there. So that's what we did. We did 3 workshop sessions with them before the event. And Mark Stephen was he's not in the picture, he was in the picture a minute ago. He was our chair. So he's a BBC broadcaster. He does out of doors. He's a fellow of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society. He's been to the Arctic. He's very passionate about Scottish and Arctic connections. So we were really over the moon to get him booked, because we felt it would be nice to have a chair stroke presenter to sort of be the conductor, if you like, of the discussion. So yeah, so Mark was on board. We thought, brilliant. Ewan had introduced me to Craig Matheson, who runs the Polar Academy. Honestly, I think that's probably been one of the most amazing introductions of my life, because he runs this Polar Academy and he takes young people who he would describe as maybe voiceless, that haven't had a chance to have their voice heard or have had a difficult situation in their lives, and he trains them up and takes them on an expedition to East Greenland. It's extraordinary. And we've got a wee film of that coming up in a minute. And these young people come back and it's transformational. They get a lot of support in terms of public speaking, and they go on to tell their story and what they went through to, what they achieved to lots of other school children too. So really amazing. He was one of our guest panels. We had Inga Relf, who is this amazing woman who, if you look at her on LinkedIn, she's just got a CV that makes you go, oh, how have you managed to do so much in your life? But she runs Global Choices now, and they have a network of Arctic Angels, are called, which are young women who go out and spread the word about the Arctic and Antarctic and how we need to protect the ice. And they're really big on pushing this agenda, because obviously as the Earth's thermostats, what happens in the Arctic, for instance, directly affects us. And we've seen that this summer with all the terrible fires and floods across Europe and in America and Canada too. So and then our third guest was Brian Pottle, who is president of the National Inuit Youth Council. And he's like in his late 20s, comes from Newfoundland, Labrador. He's just been made president of the National Inuit Youth Council recently. He is an engineer at university there, graduated now. So he had a really great perspective on sort of the youth aspect and encouraging young people to stay in the Arctic and opportunities, very like what's like in the Highlands as well, in terms of a lack of connectivity or, opportunities for good jobs, well-paid, skilled jobs. So yeah, so that was really interesting. And hilariously, of course, Brian, so we introduced Brian to our Glaswegian youth delegate, Dylan, who's not here today. And Brian had a wee bit of trouble understanding the Glasgow accent. So next time they get together, we're going to have subtitles. But yeah, so we felt it was a really great panel. And there was lots of people on that panel who are used to working with maybe young people that hadn't had a chance to, speak out before about what they thought. But actually, when we got them all together, they had loads of opinions, and they were ready to give them and ready to talk about it. And we're really pleased with how it went.
Absolutely. And shortly on our YouTube channel, Renew the World, and also on our social media, our Twitter feed at renew_the_world, you will see clips of these discussions coming up as well. Because yeah, it was really, really fantastic. And as Ali said, we had Kim from Bathgate. Kim is actually one of Craig's Polar Academy graduates. Dylan from Glasgow, who was super at Gregor, who's a colleague of Cara's from Dunfermline, and Alicia from Larbert, were all absolutely brilliant. But just to set a little bit of the context of this, yeah, we thought we would play that little film from the Polar Academy, who are one of our partners. Again, just to explain a little bit more for people who've not been part of it, what it feels like, what it looks like.
I went out my way to make the Polar Academy the toughest children's project ever. There is nothing tough anymore. We're all afraid as adults of getting in trouble. So we bubble wrap our kids. We've gone soft. The Polar Academy was set up to turn essentially invisible kids into true role models, people that other kids can look up to. It's the only thing that works, and it works every time. These kids are going to face intensive cold, strong winds, rain. Greenland is a really wild place. And don't think about it, just keep going. We need to get back to a point where we can actually look at our children and think, yeah, they can do incredible things. They might just be 14, but they can do incredible things instead of stopping them doing stuff. This isn't bubble wrapped school trip. This is a polar expedition.
It makes me laugh. I think about all the times I've got into a panic putting a tent up at Loch Lomond, and then you see them putting a tent up there and you think, right, I'll never complain again.
Yeah, and I think we fully endorse what Craig says. You will never cease to be amazed by what people can do when given the right opportunity, given the right environment, and given the right conditions. And that's exactly the same philosophy that we have here at Renew the World. It's just that we think if we join the dots of all the people around the planet who are doing all these amazing things, then who knows what will be seeded, what will be inspired. But one thing is for certain, is that innovation will always come when people are given the opportunity to do it. And they will develop and come up with ideas and things that none of us can foresee. And there is nothing more certain than that. And I think, Craig proves that every single time with him and his team at the Polar Academy. And we aim to prove that on a whole host of other fronts as well. But we asked, I guess one of the things we were quite keen to, to understand from the young people who joined us on that stage and took part in that discussion was, in the beginning, so a few weeks ago, what did they know about the Arctic? And I think it's fair to say, Ali, that, over the kind of preparation time for that, a lot of information was learned, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we did those 3 Zoom workshops with them, and that was great because we kind of got to know them, even though it was virtually. And Mark Stephen joined us for 2 of them, and because he's got years of broadcasting and interviewing skills, he was really great at sort of drawing ideas because we wanted it to be led by them and not us saying, "Isn't it awful what's happening in the Arctic? What we're going to do about the ice?" Rather give them the information and see what they came up with. And it was interesting hearing from Kim as a Polar Academy graduate, what she had observed when she'd been out there, and thinking about, for instance, she told a story about how they'd been out on a boat and they'd been hunting for seals, and of course, all the kids from Scotland were a bit like, "Oh, don't kill the seal," but obviously they have a different perspective on resilience and what they eat and really eating locally. Anyway, apparently the seal escaped, so they were all breathed a huge sigh of relief that they wouldn't have to witness it. But yes, she said it was interesting just seeing it from their perspective, and also trying to sort of marry that up with protecting biodiversity and natural habitats, but also living off the land and sea, and how that whole balance, that equilibrium is just completely out of kilter. So we had lots of interesting discussions like that, and I felt like by the time we got to the day, you wanted to give people the confidence to be able to sit on a stage at New York Times in front of a reasonably big audience and feel that they could ask those questions. So even though we only did 3 with them in the end, I felt by the time they got there, they were nervous before they went on. We were all nervous. But yeah, once we got up and running, it was great.
No, absolutely, it was fabulous, and I think obviously what we wanted to do was tell the story of some of that experience today, and share that with you guys. And you're absolutely right, Ali. Everybody involved, and I think Carol, say this yourself, that maybe a little bit nervous before, but once you got going, it was great, wasn't it?
I think the most nervous wracking bit was we were just at the side of the stage and they were putting the mics on everybody, and you could see everybody going, "Oh," at that point on both occasions. I think it's just that last 5 minutes, isn't it, before you go on and you think, "I'm going to have to speak now," but you did brilliantly.
Yeah, but we're gonna hear a lot more from Cara in a wee minute. But I think one of obviously we talked a lot about what is happening in the Arctic region. I think what surprised quite a lot of the young people who joined us was, I think, some of the familiarity with some of the discussions that they were hearing and seeing, but also then some of the big surprises, in terms of that story that Ali mentioned about, that seal that got away. The upfront reality of, well, hold on a minute, this is your food going on your plate and it was living a few minutes ago, was actually quite, I don't want to say shocking, but it was a stark reminder for our young people that the food that they pick up from supermarket is, has been through a kind of similar process. They just don't see it, and it's not quite so immediate. And I think that was quite interesting, wasn't it? They were sort of taking stock of that, because objectively we all know this, but it's not till you stop and think about it and maybe just about see some of that. And then at the same time, that the rate of change in the Arctic was really surprising, wasn't it, Ali, in terms of the amount of ice melting that's way beyond what was discussed normally.
Yeah, we played in that film of, Lewis Pugh, who swam through the Greenland waters. I mean, it's just bananas what he did, really. It's extraordinary. But it's a really great illustration of what's happening to the ice there. And Inga and Craig were able to talk about that. And Craig, he's a polar explorer himself. So he's explored all around the poles, and differences he's seen in the sort of decades since he started doing that. It's alarming. And of course, just talking about what happens when the ice melts, how that affects weather patterns and all the climate-induced weather disasters. And obviously Scotland will be very affected by that. So we need to work closely on preserving the ice and making sure that people don't think, oh great, there's a new route opened up in that part of the world for shipping, for instance. And then, they drive these big polluting ships through where the ice should have been. So yes, there were some interesting discussions about that.
There was, and one of the interesting things that came out of a discussion that was held here next door the other day on National Inuit Day was the fact that obviously Inuit people, Indigenous people from that part of the world, are very keen for these ships not to be going down any potential new routes, because, as they said, it takes one ship to crash or spill, one environmental disaster to cause absolute mayhem and devastation for decades with just one accident, because they simply don't and can't have the capability to deal with a spill like that. It is just not possible. So it would destroy the environment quickly and pollute it for decades. So I think that was also really really sobering. But at the same time, during our panel discussion, there was a real sense of positivity, actually, wasn't there, Ali? I mean, Inga and Craig, and I will say this about Craig, he is the first Scotsman ever to have visited both the North Pole and the South Pole. So yeah, he's probably got the stripes, but
yeah, he has, and he's not like a big sort of macho guy. I was really impressed by him. It's incredible what he's done, and the Polar Academy is incredible, and he's just quite a sort of unassuming person in lots of ways, but obviously very dynamic. But we had a lovely bit, which playing a bit. We had messages from young people in East Greenland to our young people about how they felt about where they lived and the changes that they'd seen, and that was a really nice moment as part of that. So I think we'll be playing that in a wee minute.
We will, and also I think the message coming out of that discussion was that actually there was a lot of positivity.
Yeah.
So people in the Arctic were actually overwhelmingly quite positive that things could be done, that the right changes could be made. COP26 is an important stepping stone, but it's, as we all know, it's not going to solve climate change in 12 days. But it was an important stepping stone, and the recognition of this is now there, and actually, importantly, people are not questioning the reality of climate change and its effects on the Arctic anymore, and the fact that both polar regions are the world's thermostats. Humans are an ice-dependent species. We can't survive without the ice. It literally cleans the oxygen that we breathe in many respects, and it's again that I think has been a really big step forward over the last few weeks. But yeah, there was a lot of positivity that actually things were beginning to move in the right direction, and that people were being listened to better, and that the solutions were there for success. So ultimately we did, and as Ali said, we heard got a little film I'm just going to play you, which was sent to us, well, bits of it where we put it together in this kind of format, and it's just a lovely little film from some of the reality of what young people experience in their lives in East Greenland.
Fordi altså der er den her historie som tiden, og det er fortsat lidt sådan et lukket mysterium, men stadig det er jo
Okay, kita na Oktober sa magkayo nga wapo. Nung nakita på na ito dito tamatabi sa magkayo na Oktober.
Det er fuldstændig enestående og unikt og vedvarende, og man kan ikke erstatte det her med noget andet.
Makamatsi mo na may ira ako nakatara pa kasi ano na may shumari ngayon. Kaya nang para pa kamatsi ko ano ra. Kamay kurap na pa rin nila kamay kurap na hirap.
Ano nga ni pingokila isumaka po. Kayo ang kayo. Iturito nakakama halit neta ni. Kaya nakakapwa kami.
Man allerbedst, det er at være beskeden og ydmyg, fordi at man føler sig enormt lille i det her enestående sted.
Tamani til at iturito
Altså det her er, det Silak er helt klart porten til at lære de her mest dybdegående ting i livet. Det tror jeg det er her.
So yeah, ultimately our first discussion ended on a really positive note. People believing that young people in Scotland and across the world could collaborate far better with young people in the Arctic, understanding each other's perspectives, sharing ideas, and that solutions could certainly be found to improve matters for everyone. And then we moved on to our second session later on last Friday, the one in which Cara was heavily involved, and it was about young female voices for change, exactly like Cara. And how do we make sure we unlock the potential of young women for a just transition? And of course, as you can see, what we want to do is really make sure that a just transition is the moment that we take to make sure that we don't just get it wrong and exacerbate inequalities that are pre-existing.
Yes. And I think, often when we think about just transition, we think about the fossil fuel industry and making sure that, all the great skills are in that industry and all talented people who can be decommissioning all the rigs and all the rest of it, get decent jobs in the renewables sector and retain that talent. But really a just transition is kind of a matter of climate justice as much as and social justice as much as anything else. And it's an opportunity to address imbalances and inequalities across societies, particularly in terms of gender and, also in terms of other groups that are maybe, wouldn't have the same advantages as certain sectors of society. So there's actually a lot talked about this at COP, at actual COP and all the fringe events, which, we were delighted to see. But we felt that for this panel, it'd be nice to have like young women's voices from across the UK. So Cara was our Scottish delegate, and we had Molly from Wales, Anna from Northern Ireland, and Anjali from England. So that was really interesting because then we had all their different perspectives. And Anjali, for instance, she's run a campaign group called Choked Up, all about air pollution in London and how it affects communities of colour much more than other communities. Molly has been working a wee bit in climate activism in Wales. She's at uni in Liverpool now, and Anna's also been involved in it in Northern Ireland. So it was interesting hearing all their perspectives for the Zoom workshops. And what did you think about that, Cara?
because they're quite different from me, because I come from like just a school-based background. I have not really done anything compared to the other girls, sort of.
But did you feel, I mean, this is what was nice about the Zoom workshops. I mean, Anna wasn't able to join us for all of them, but we had Molly and Angeli, and, you know, you got to know each other a wee bit virtually, although you didn't actually meet to the day. But did you feel that everyone got a chance to say what they thought about things? And
yeah, it was quite fair discussions between us.
Good. Phew. That's what we were getting. That's what we were aiming for. And, you know, it's just great to sort of draw out your perspectives. And so we, like the first bunch of youth delegates, we sort of said, right, we want you to lead this. And what are your concerns? And, you know, you can think about what are your immediate concerns now, and let's see how it evolves over the 3 sessions. So it was over the 3 sessions that you kind of thought about what you wanted to ask on day.
Yeah, because I kind of didn't know at the start, but then I found a subject area, which is like Indigenous life, sort of, and how that's going to be affected by climate change.
So that was a great question, all about, you know, Indigenous communities and Indigenous knowledge, and women's Indigenous groups as well, because we had some interesting people on the panel, didn't we? So we had Divya Nawali, who is actually one of the Arctic Angels, but she's based in Southeast Asia, and she works in the clean energy and finance industry, and she's done lots of community-led projects in climate change. She's set up solar microgrids in the Himalayas. She's really amazing at young women. Actually, she's done so much with her life. So we had her perspective, and we also had Freddie Campbell, who's a Métis woman from what we would call Canada, but obviously the unceded territories there. And she works in clean energy as well. So she was really keen to talk about working with Indigenous groups, and, you know, incorporating that knowledge into sort of community-based energy projects, clean energy projects. So she had loads to say about that, didn't she?
Yeah.
And you had a follow-up question as well, didn't you?
Asking like how like their projects have helped people, what would like to see in the future with their projects.
Yeah. So it was good. So it's really interesting what they've been doing. And of course, we had Janice Forsyth for that one, you know, another BBC presenter. So she was our chair for that. And Janice was right up front. She kind of came on stage, you know, come on, the women. And so there was a great energy and atmosphere right from the start, wasn't there? And a big gang of you on the stage, basically.
And Cara, what did you think? You asked that the questions. What did you think of what you heard in terms of response?
I think it's quite good, because I didn't really know what was happening like with Indigenous life, sort of, because I'm quite sheltered. It was quite interesting to see what their perspectives on like how they've been affected and what we could do to help them, sort of.
Yeah, good. And we were lucky to be joined by Kate Forbes, MSP, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Economy in the Scottish Government, and Jennifer Finn and Poonam Malik, who you can see. Ali, do you want to tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, so honestly, it was like a powerhouse of amazing women. It was brilliant. You know, Dr. Poonam Malik, she's like this polymath. I wouldn't even know where to start with what she's done with her life. She's lived about 80 lives in one. So she's an expert in tech. She's a member of the Royal Society of Biology. She does angel investments, so she encourages women into sort of investment situations. She's really big into role models and mentoring in Scottish business. So she's on the board of Scottish Enterprise. Honestly, her biography, I had to kind of cut it down, and I was thinking, I don't even know where to start. So she was really great. There's a nice wee clip with her coming up as well later on. And then we had Jennifer Finn, another amazing person. So she runs, she's a managing director of an installation company, and she talks about the importance of creating a carbon army, you know, with people who are skilled to put in the heat pumps and to insulate our homes properly, so that we can reduce carbon emissions from the built environment. So she was really interesting on that. And she talked a lot, Cara, didn't she, about why are we still talking about the fact that women aren't doing this? Why are we just not getting on with that? Why is in the 21st century, is this still a topic that we have to have an international event like this? It just needs to be part of the program, and we don't even think about it anymore. So she was very dynamic on that. And Kate was great on the finance aspect. And she talked a lot about, you know, being a female politician, didn't she? And don't be put off by what female politicians get put through. We need to move on from that too. She was quite strong on that, wasn't she? Obviously, she's been on the receiving end of a fair bit of abuse, like most female politicians. But you know, she was really focusing in on kind of linking arms and passing the mic and giving people opportunities, didn't she? And what did you think about what the other girls asked?
They asked like more like Molly. I think it was Molly who asked like about like ticket price and stuff, because the event costs like £400 just for a day to attend, like making it more inclusive to everyone else, sort of. It was like online, you can attend online, but then some people might not be able to do that on the day. So
yeah, that's right, because she was worried about accessibility. You know, she was saying, how can we make sure the just transition is properly accessible, you know, to women from sort of working class communities, as well as, you know, you know, people that maybe have better or fuller networks or more opportunities. We also talked about making sure that, you know, disabled women are included in this and given opportunities as well to, you know, so it's really, that was a good question as well, wasn't it, that Molly asked. And then what was Anna's one? Can you remember Anna's question? Well, that was she wanted to talk about intersectionality. So Freddie Campbell was really wanted to talk about that, and they do a lot of work with sort of intersectional communities in the clean energy projects that she works on as well. So yeah, when we got through some good meaty questions, didn't we? We only had 45 minutes and like 9, you know, quite talkative people on stage. So we were thinking this is going to go by in a flash, and it did in the end, didn't it?
Yeah, it was quite quick, because like I thought, like, because I watched the session before, so I was like less nervous because I know how it went. I was quite worried on the day, but when I saw the first session, I was like, oh, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Oh, that's good. It's great to hear that, because, you know, you seemed so confident, and they all seemed so confident, and you had quite a big audience for that one. It was bigger than the one that we'd had earlier on in the day. And a lot of people had come in, I think, you know, to see us and then got to see John Kerry. So, but yeah, it was a bit more. It was much bigger an audience, really, wasn't it? Yeah. But I think what I hope was it felt like it was a real togetherness with the panel, you know, that you were all sort of rooting for the same thing. So yeah, good.
Yeah, we and we're going to see couple of little clips, as Ali said, from some of our participants from the day. But we also thought it'd be worth sharing with the audience today some of the work that we were looking at before the sessions, and some of these really good quotes. First one there from Marion Wright Edelman from America, so founder and president of what they call Children's Defense Fund. You can't be what you can't see, and I think that is a really important truth. But then equally, there's the statement I'm reminded of, which I learned from a good friend of mine, where he often quotes Tarana Burke, the founder of the Me Too movement. And if I can't see you, I can't hear you, which again, I think is the sort of next step on from that. You've got to be there to be seen. And once you're seen, you've got to be heard. And I think that's really important. And you know, we all have a responsibility to enable, young people like Cara and those of us not so young to be seen and to be heard. Because if we're to be successful, we've got to take every single generation with us. And what we say at Renew the World is that everybody alive on the planet right now, from 8 to 108, is part of Generation Net Zero. That's the way we've got to look at this. And very often we hear people with a certain amount of power and responsibility talk fulsomely about the younger generation. And you have to be very careful not to use that as deflection for actual responsibility for taking action yourselves. So don't shy away from saying that, to be honest. I think that's the truth. And as Ali said, Catherine Wilkinson, well, she's a bit of a hero of yours, isn't she?
Yeah, I like her, although she's got quite an American angle on things, and for Scottish pragmatic folk, we need to find maybe a different way of saying it to get the message across. But she talks a lot about how women need to kind of harness their sort of nurturing side of their personalities. But, I can think of lots of women who aren't particularly nurturing, but by God, have they got a lot to offer in this arena. So I don't think you can sort of lump characteristics on women in that sense. We've all got something different to bring to this. So let's bring it. And, that's important. But what she's really great on, I think, is that idea of, linking arms and passing the mic and collaborating and, being there for change and not sort of fighting over who's in charge, which, let's face it, we see a lot in the world of politics and government. So hers is a very positive message. on, you know, what women can bring to the table in that aspect. So we wanted to include her. And of course, we had to have AOC, who's come to Scotland to COP and drunk Iron Brew and basically been a total celebrity. It's been, you know, fantastic. What a great role model she is, because there's a lot of substance behind her as well, and what she stands for and what she believes in. So yeah, she's a pretty good role model. Did you see any of that, Cara? Did you see her drinking the Iron Brew with Nicola Sturgeon?
Not really.
Yeah, Iron Brew must be delighted, and they're getting another mention now if they're watching.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to partner with Iron Brew. Absolutely, but yeah, and as you say, I think, and you know what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talks about there is exactly that whole point of, you know, coming together across all aspects of humanity. But let's hear some words from Kate Forbes, MSP, who is obviously.
It's about policy. Every single policy should be viewed through a gender lens, because we are talking at the moment about a just transition. We're talking about inequalities that are going to be exacerbated as a result of climate change. Those inequalities existed already. Climate change is going to make them worse unless we truly believe in a just transition. And my view is that a just transition is not inevitable. You have to create it, you have to make it, and if we believe in delivering it, then we jolly better make sure that 50% of the world's population are part of the decision-making process. I mean, I've got a real fear emerging from COP26 that in the urgency to meet our climate change ambitions and to deliver net zero, we think that the end justifies the means. And we have an opportunity, we're at a crossroads. Either we can come out of this with fairer prosperity, or we come out of this just exacerbating inequalities, starting with those who are most vulnerable, most disadvantaged, working with them, for example, on measures like energy efficiency. You end up reducing the number of people in fuel poverty and delivering net zero. But that's a choice. Governments must make that choice. We must hold them to account, and we must hold all businesses to account as well, particularly the financiers who are key to this, because we can't do it with public funding alone. But there needs to be regulation in place to ensure that we deliver the just transition, because as I said a few moments ago, it's not inevitable.
So we were really pleased when she said holding governments to account. We thought, yes, that's what we're going to do. As part of the legacy afterwards, Cara, once Cara's got her prelims out of the way, and obviously that's what's coming up next, give them a bit of a breather after COP. That's one of our sort of next steps, is, you know, getting in front of parliamentarians and saying, right, so what are you going to do about this? And we've heard a lot about, let's get young people involved in policy making and policy decisions. Well, we've got some great young people who've got great ideas. You know, why didn't you have a listen to them and see, you know, how that could actually be made a reality rather than something else that's talked about a lot but not actually, you know, achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also heard from a young woman called Thandeka Yawara from South Africa, who is a senior water engineer, actually, and she gave a really interesting perspective via video for part of that discussion as well, which was another really interesting inflection point, wasn't it? Yeah,
because we felt we didn't want to just talk about it from a sort of Scottish or UK angle. You know, obviously, part of our idea for Renew the World is it's, you know, local solutions, but local solutions that can be, you know, transferable across kind of international borders, so that we can all make a success of this. So it was great that we had, you know, Thandeka from South Africa, and we had our Canadian, and then we had, you know, somebody from Asia, as well as all our sort of our Scottish and UK representatives as well. It's good.
Well, let's hear from Thandeka.
Hi, I'm Thandeka Dwacha. I'm a chemical engineer by profession. I come from South Africa. Being in the water and sanitation sector has made me understand that there is an intricate balance between climate change and water resource management, which has led to talks of climate resilient water management. So a few projects that I've been involved in, which look at finding solutions to climate resiliency, have been reimagining wastewater as a resource. where we look at trying to produce electricity from wastewater, as well as reimagining or rethinking how we source water. And also being able to teach our communities about the importance of preserving and conserving nature through planting of trees, water talks, environmental talks, you name it. So I'm really looking forward to being part of a team that will be looking at climate resilient solutions and ensuring a sustainable future for all.
So, Cara, what you came into this, you know, and it was a number of weeks ago now, as you said earlier, all new to this. What did you learn about the whole discussion of a just transition and unlocking female voices?
Well, I know like there was quite a lot of inequalities. I didn't know there was inequalities in females, like power positions, sort of just being a school-aged girl. But I've learned like just so much in the last few weeks I didn't know about.
And what's been a standout for you in terms of some of those things that you've learned?
The standouts is like even like the big COP thing, like some of the stuff we're talking about like is not as good as they should be talking about.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important. And was there things that you learned obviously from some of those discussions? You talked about, you know, Indigenous people in your questions, and you listened to other questions. Was there stuff that really surprised you?
Like about like how like there's like all inequalities of like disabled people as well, because I've got a disabled little sister. Like I was surprised like they're got barely any like society roles sort of compared to the rest of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. It's the amount of discussion given over to the disabled community is very, very small in comparison to actually quite a large number of people, isn't it? And Ali, as well. Anything that surprised or delighted you from what we were doing?
Well, it just surpassed my expectations. I think I had quite high expectations, and it was like, because I thought it's just going to be great. And it was great. I thought, you know, the four of you, Cara, you know, you were all brilliant, and it felt really good. You know, because we started out, as I say, we wanted to be led by the young people, you know, but you think when you're older and you're a parent as well, you spend your whole life bossing your own children around. You don't want to end up sort of doing that again with all your young delegates. But I felt like, you know, you'd all really gone and thought about what you wanted to say. So the whole discussion was based around that, and it made a really interesting discussion. And the guests really wanted to talk about what you guys came up with. So it did. It surpassed my expectations, which were, I say, high. And there was real energy, and everybody came off really buzzing afterwards. And then we all sort of scuffled upstairs to watch John Kerry. And I was sitting listening to John Kerry thinking, I need to sort of digest what's just happened, because it felt really energizing, and it felt important, and it felt like it was really going to go somewhere, especially with ideas that came out of it, and we were talking about this in the bus on the way over today, next steps, and what we're going to do next with these great ideas and these concerns.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll come to that in a wee second, but I think it's a good moment to hear some words from Dr. Poonam Malik, who is Head of Investments here at Strathclyde University, of course.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that. Another thing on her CV.
And that is her day job now. And this is just a short few words, but yeah, she's got some important things to say.
I'm passionate about women's participation and women leadership. Biologically, we are 50% of the population. But if you saw the recent picture of nations leaders, which are decision makers and policy makers, which is required for climate change and climate tech, there was very, very little. So that's the challenge, that women are there in the general population who face displacement as when the climate resources scarcity happens, but they are not at the decision making, they're not at the policy making, they're not at the influencing level. And unless we can bring them along, they are going to be the biggest sufferers. I think this is the need of the hour, need of the decade, and need of the century. I'm hopeful that the momentum is gathering up. I'm hopeful that the time is right for us all to work together. Women need to lead, but women need to be at the table where the decisions are being made.
So as we kind of round up this discussion, and we're certainly open to any Q&A from anybody who wants to ask any questions. But obviously, we're now looking to try and pass the baton on to Egypt for COP27 in 12 months' time, which feels very close, actually. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe COP26, well, who knows what the next 12 hours are going to bring. And we know that nations, governments are in deep discussion as we speak, as we stand here, just round the corner from us. But what are your hopes, Cara, for the next kind of 12 months as the world heads towards COP27?
Discussions like more with young people, like our generation, sort of, instead of just like the older generation getting involved. And also they should actually do what you're saying, the policy, instead of just make up policies that are not going to be used.
Okay, so real policy, real intent. I think that's important. Ali, what do you think?
Well, I think there should be a really important COP handover for young people involved in that and at the forefront of that. Because, we started off worrying that there wasn't going to be enough young people at this COP. And actually, I think there has been a lot of young people at COP. And I mean, those marches and strikes and protests through Glasgow just looked amazing, and all these young people from all ages, like all the primary kids that were there as well, they have got to be at the forefront of the handover. I think that to me would be really vital, and not just for photo ops, but actually, as part of, holding leaders' feet to the fire about some better decisions and some more radical changes, not the same old business as usual, because that's destroying the planet. And, like young folk like Cara and, the young people that were involved with us, they're really clear on that. They don't have any of the sort of vested interests or sort of set in our ways or, set ways of looking at things, I think. And we need that perspective. And like you were saying, you're going to inherit the mess. You are inheriting the mess. So therefore you need to be part of the solution. You agree?
Yeah.
And are there any particular things you'd like to see here in Scotland, Cara? I know you've got, this has inspired lots of thoughts and interests as well. Anything you particularly like to see?
Well, one of the discussion points wasn't really mentioned as farming, kind of like that's one of the biggest polluters yet. It's not talked about at all, pretty much in the media. I like to like people actually talk about like how we can make farming more sustainable in the future.
Yeah, I think sustainability in farming is a really, really big issue. I know there's been a number of discussions with Scottish Food and Drink, and there was one hosted yesterday, I think. I'm starting to lose perspective on one day running into the next, but I think it was. And I know there's been a number, but I think you're right, Cara, in amongst a lot of the noise, it's not talked about often in the mainstream media. So farming and agriculture, which has a huge part to play for all of us, of course. Ali, what do you think you would?
Well, I think there's not enough focus on, I think you're right about that actually. And I'm thinking about farming, cultural stuff and fisheries and the seas and carbon sequestration opportunities, restoring our seagrass meadows and our oyster beds, and the incredible biodiversity in Scottish seawater that's destroyed by a lot of problems with the fishing industry. So to me, that's part of the same thing. And I think that here we are in Scotland, and we're oozing with natural resources. We've got a real opportunity to do something in a sustainable and nature-based way that we can all benefit from as communities. I like that phrase, Scots as stakeholders. So it's not like a shareholders thing where a few people benefit from natural resources, that we all benefit from it. And that's what I would like to see going forward, is Scotland creating some blueprints for, how people going about their normal lives can benefit from all the sort of the natural wonders that are around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really key point, is certainly from my point of view, the number of things I'd like to see taken really seriously. We talk a lot about things, which is great, and you have to start somewhere. But some real actions being taken on how we transition into a much greener economy. You know, I'd love to see institutions like this be at the heart of creating electrolyzers so that we can have green hydrogen produced here in Scotland using kit that's made here in Scotland, manufactured here in Scotland, because to me it seems questionable if in producing a green economy, the equipment to do so is shipped halfway around the world. Kind of rather negates a lot of the point, and we don't need to. We have the expertise, we have the capability. I'd love to see some more of, and I know we have the desire, so I'd love to see some of that really come to fruition. And I think the next 12 months are really critical. We've got maybe a 10-year window of opportunity here. So, you know, it's big. Are there any areas of interest, Cara, that, you know, kind of on a bigger global scale that you'd like to see actions on as well, now that you've been part of this discussion?
About nature, because we talk about our species and it's going to affect every species of the world. Like COP, pretty much they've all talked about humans, but we're only one of millions of species that live on this earth. So why aren't we talking about other species and not just humans? Because we're the ones that damage the earth and we're the ones that have to solve it. But we should also think about all the other species that are going to be affected by it.
I think that's a really good point, because there was that report, you know, shortly before COP, saying about all the loss of species in Scotland, just in one wee country, you know, and it's terrifying, really. So yeah, I think there needs to be more focus on that, and I know there's groups really pushing that, Cara. But yes, you're right. We've made the mess, but it's animals and wildlife that, you know, are being so badly affected by it.
Yeah, I was struck very powerfully by some of the Inuit voices that were on stage, as I said, on Sunday, just next door. And very much their perspective has always been that, you know, humans are no more powerful than the polar bear. And yeah, polar bears and humans are at the top of the particular food chains that they exist within, but it's all about respect. They've got to respect each other and not take a kind of dominant perspective where it's there just for humans to take. And actually, once you start to understand and that Inuit perspective of fully appreciating the life cycle within which they exist and are part, and therefore every bit of that cycle has to be respected and taken care of and really nurtured. And you think if there was a lot more of that around the world, we'd be a lot further ahead, a lot faster. Yeah, so listen, conscious of time, thank you for all of to all of you for joining us. If there's any questions, we're more than delighted to take any. But yeah, thank you again for sticking with us.
Young voices and young people have been out and about in Glasgow, kind of making their statements and wanting people to get on with it. But it's obviously quite a different experience to be sitting on a stage with a panel of older people, younger people. It's quite daunting, quite scary. So do you have any words to say to the younger generations about that experience, maybe an inspiration for them to? Maybe like we could also bring a message to schools, sort of, because like it's not really talked about, like the environments in schools, sort of like if they have teachers, even just like me, I can maybe go into schools and so I just talk to our generation, like the younger people. Sort of, they're not really taught much, are they, compared to what they should be taught about the environment? See.
Kind of following on from that, I was going to ask if you had it still, but obviously not. Do you feel yourself kind of feel a responsibility to bring that into your school? Because I mean, 5 years ago, I remember how daunting it was. Are you kind of bringing it in?
Well, our schools kind of started to like an environmental science course I take this year. That's like only just being introduced. It's like 2019, I think the Scottish government set up, and it's just slowly being rolled out throughout schools. Like that course could be good in all schools, but it's only so far, only a select couple have it. So if they roll that out more, it'd be a lot better, I think.
Hugely optimistic way to finish up. I think our experience here to hear from a young person like yourself, so clear, so positive, and a really nice, positive way of renewing the world. You know, and if we are looking at that, you're the very person, I think, that will take that forward. So huge thanks to you guys. We have this recorded, and it will be wonderful to share wonderful stories. And yeah, you're very welcome to join us as it's probably not the right phrase to use, but melt down. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah, great. Thank you.